Welcome to the Success Resequencing Project. I'm Debbie Ponticus.
And I'm Jenn Newman.
Join us as we challenge the traditional definitions of success so you can build a fulfilling path of your own.
Get ready for inspired, candid conversations while gaining tools, inspiration, and confidence to create your own authentic success story.
Good Monday morning.
Good Monday morning to you.
Thank you.
And listeners, good Tuesday morning.
Yes, we should.
Or whatever day of the week
is that you're listening.
Consume this lovely episode.
That's right. Mm-hmm. But just so you know, it's Monday for us at this moment.
It is.
Every day's a Monday. Okay. One of the things that I wanted us to chat about today is basically that, chatting, conversation.
Okay.
Like the importance of and the skill of having conversation with someone. And what does that look like? How does that work in business? Why is that important in business? Because I've just been listening a lot. You know how things start coming into your life a lot because you you hear something, a podcast, or and then now all of a sudden you hear this topic over and over again. Well, this has been one that has just been popping up a bunch for me lately on how important it is to just be a good conversationalist. And so I had listened to a podcast. It was almost like a YouTube show that was done by, I don't know if you've heard of Celeste Headley.
I haven't.
Yeah. So I hadn't either until someone shared this with me. And she works with Google, and she's a radio host, TED speaker, and she has a book called We Need to Talk. So it's on order. So I didn't get here in time. Otherwise I would have brought it. But, it was a really interesting topic that she brought up, and she gave 12 tips on how to become a good conversationalist or what you should do. So we'll walk through that today.
Yep.
But what are your thoughts just on how important conversation is in just business?
It's critical. I mean, without conversation, without active listening, without a critical ear, I mean, that's where all the good stuff is.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's what's not being said in that conversation that sometimes it really leads us down a path of where there's more to be curious about or ask more questions, deeper questions to get to the heart of the matter. But I can't imagine, oh my goodness, without it, and especially in business, to me, that's what separates, in my mind, relationship versus transactional. Is being able to connect on a human level, to understand the heart of someone, what their needs are, what they're wanting, be able to then actively listen and hear and glean from them what it is that they're searching for, and be able to articulate that back to them, manage those expectations, and then build that relationship. I think that's, it feels very foundational and critical to the success of at least my business.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a matter of understanding that it's not although it should sound easy to just be able to have a conversation, it's actually not necessarily easy for everyone. It can be can create a lot of anxiety. It can be very off-putting to think that I need to go in and now start a conversation with someone. Because I think possibly, and it's interesting how she goes into a lot of this, which we'll go into in a second, but people come into conversation with the wrong, they're not coming into it with the right, like what they're trying to get out of it. They're trying to get something out of it, right? Instead of understanding that conversation is about making a connection, not about trying to navigate a negotiation.
Right.
And that's where in business, and it can also be just in general relationships as well. Like if you can't figure out how to become a good conversationalist and just ask questions and come into it with an idea of like, what can I learn from this person?
Right.
Not how do it's not a chess game, and I think a lot of the times we're taught with negotiations and in business that conversation is about trying to get the other person to where you want them. You're trying to lead them to your end point.
Yeah, that's manipulation.
Right. And so that's not conversation.
Right.
And that's not where you build relationships.
Right.
You build relationships when you approach conversation differently, where it's more about like, how do I connect with that person that I'm sitting there talking to on the phone with, at a networking event with, so that they and you walk away learning something.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
And how important is just identifying that skill. And I think one of the things that has come into play in the past 5, 10-ish years is distractions that we have that keep us from entering into good conversations, like cell phones. People want to just send a quick text or send a quick email instead of actually picking up the phone and having meaningful conversations. Doesn't mean that this has to be a 5, 10, 20-minute conversation, but to just hear the other person, how they react to a question.
Of course.
And I'm guilty of this a lot of times because I just have 6,000 things I'm trying to get done. And I'm like, oh, I don't have time to pick up the phone and call that person because I just need a quick answer. So I'm just going to send them a quick text. I'm going to shoot a quick email off.
Yep.
I think we get, I need to work on that personally.
Yeah.
Because I'm missing a lot.
Yeah. Well, the connection with people is everything. So we end up isolating ourselves if we're only connecting digitally. If we're not connecting in real time or having face-to-face or at least voice-to-voice contact, there's so many assumptions that are left for tone and for intention. And when it sometimes is actually that much simpler to just have the conversation instead of everything having to be in this diplomatic or written form, that can be really exhausting.
Yeah.
Trying to navigate, because now we're making assumptions, we're not sure. Sometimes it really is better to just pick up the phone and have that quick call instead of 14 texts that have to go back and forth trying to interpret tone.
That's where it gets tricky, I think, is when you're interpreting tone or you're not understanding that someone may interpret it because you don't know where they are, where their mindset is when they receive a communication, whether it's an email or a text. They could have just gotten really bad news, or maybe they're being put under pressure with a coworker at work or their boss and all this. Now they get a text from you that may be short. And so they're taking it as, it's short, it's offensive, it's, now they're on the defensive it's like.
Or maybe it's not even about them. Maybe it's about, there are just certain things that don't need to be handled that way.
Right.
Right? Like sometimes I understand we're in a business, of course, that we need to make sure that everything's in writing. And I grasp what that means in a very meaningful way. But 9 times out of 10, I'm going to follow up with what we have discussed. Because the reason texts and emails don't always land is because you don't have context first. You don't know what time they're reading it. You're also assuming that as soon as it gets to them, that they have the time and space to be able to handle it. Sometimes they don't. Yeah. So if I call and I don't get a response right away, that shows me already in that moment, they're busy.
Yeah.
So when they have the time, they're going to connect back with me. And therefore, we're going to be able to have a meaningful conversation. 5 minutes or 2 hours, doesn't matter, because we're connecting in real time and we are picking up on each other's cues in real time.
Yeah.
And I find that incredibly challenging to do. Especially in a day and age where the assumption is because we have our phones all the time that we are therefore expected to respond immediately. Mm-hmm. And I know for myself, if that were the case, I would never not be on my phone.
Yeah.
I get text messages at 3:00 in the morning. I've received them. This morning, text started coming in at 5:45. My do not disturb is on until 7:00. Not because I'm not available, meaning I'm asleep, but because I'm allowed to have my own time to gather my thoughts, get focused with intention on my day, and then I can meaningfully respond when I'm in the space to do that.
Right.
I would not pick up the phone and call someone at 5:45 in the morning.
Right.
I would wait until an appropriate time to have that conversation. That's the piece also I think is becoming a distraction, is that. And this idea that we have to be connected and tethered to that device all the time is really robbing us of the present moment.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm going to click through. I don't even know. I'm going to flip through my little notes here because she, in this podcast or in this speech she was giving, she talks about the phone and how much of a distraction is. She calls it the phone problem. And she was like, do you realize that we check our phones every 4 minutes.
I believe this.
I feel like it could be even more, depending on what I'm doing during that day. Like I'm constantly looking at my phone just to check, or if that ding sound comes in, right?
That's why I have silenced my phone. I literally have it on silent at all times. And part of it is because what has happened, it's why I stopped wearing an Apple Watch, because with the buzzing that happened on my wrist, it took me about 2 months to not reflexively look at my wrist all the time because everything was coming through there. And I realized there is no need to be connected at that level. I am not a brain surgeon. I don't need to be called in at a moment's notice. It can wait. Right. And by wait, let's be honest, sometimes that means an hour. Right. People think it's like this egregious amount of time. It's like, guys, I'm in the middle. I have to prioritize. Right. Jim is really good at this. He went through Stephen Covey. He went through Stephen Covey training years ago, time management. And he'll say now that he kind of swung too far one way, which was he scheduled his day so that he bulk responded to emails at a certain time. He bulk responded to voicemail. Everything went to voicemail. So that when he was in that space to sit and make calls, he would then thoughtfully make those return calls. But what he learned was otherwise he was interrupted all day long. Yeah. And so he was very intentional about phone time, when he was responding to emails, how he was going about his day. He's also incredibly efficient. And I think a trap that a lot of us, especially those of us who are business owners, get into is that we feel that if we don't respond to everything immediately, that we're missing the opportunity. A, we're not going to miss what's meant for us. And B, we're also then training people that they have access to us 24 hours a day. Right. And they don't actually. Yep. They don't. Absolutely. And I'd rather set a time to talk with someone. I had this back and forth with a potential client this past week. 3-hour time change. I've been in broker school. He had his own work stuff going on. And so us trying to connect was almost comical. But neither of us wanted to have that conversation over email or text. And so we finally took 30 minutes on Saturday and had a great conversation. I was so grateful for that because A, I caught everything in real time. He knew exactly what they needed. It's all good. Right. And there was no trying to decipher stuff, right? It was so straightforward. It was so great to just pick up the phone and have a call, a scheduled time. We both were available. We were both present in the moment. Yeah. That was so much better. Yeah. Than just trying to like toss emails and toss texts and Yeah. And you mentioned something about Jim, and it is something that I think I would like to try and be better at, is really being more intentional when you are going to have those, trying not to multitask. Like I'm the queen of multitask. And I feel like that makes me more productive, but it actually is anti-productive. It's really anti-productive. To be a multitasker and try and do 6 different things and to have all the tabs open. We talk about that, right? All the tabs. And actually, if you were to just go in and focus on the one, turn everything off and just focus on one task at a time, you're going to get through more and be more productive that way. So so I want to go through these 12 tips on how to become a better conversationalist. I want to kind of get your thoughts on these. So this is Celeste Headley's 12 tips. It's from her book. So number 1, which we just said, don't multitask. Mm-hmm. Be present. When you're in a conversation, don't have the phone out on the table. And she mentioned that even when you go to lunch or you're sitting down with someone, just putting the phone on the table, having that be present at the table, the other person is not taking you as serious as if there were no phones on the table. So you're discrediting the importance of that conversation. You also just invited someone else to lunch without the other person's permission. Right. Good point. Yeah. Right. It's a great way to put it. Yeah. So be present. Don't multitask. Number 2, don't pontificate. Stay open to other perspectives. Mm-hmm. So that means don't be the one doing all the talking. Yeah. Don't get up on a pedestal. Just allow a conversation to happen in a flow back and forth. Mm-hmm.
Number 3, ask open-ended questions using who, what, when, where, hi.
Hi, that works.
Yeah, that could be open-ended.
Uh-huh.
And she is a journalist. And so that's kind of her background and her training.
Yep.
But to think about that and to actually say, okay, I am going to ask just open-ended question and then stop and listen.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering, how do I start a conversation with someone? Think of a question, open-ended question. How are you today?
Let it go.
Yeah.
Let it flow.
Yeah. Oh, look at you. Next one, go with the flow. Let thoughts pass. Don't interrupt.
Yeah. Because you stop listening. You stop listening. Then you're hanging on to what you want to say and you're no longer listening to that other person.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, and you're having a conversation with yourself in your mind.
Right. And you're no longer present.
You want to get back to, because you want to make that point. You want to pontificate something. You want to preach something instead of just let it pass. Move on. If it was meant to be in the conversation, it'll come back.
It will.
And say, I don't know. Number 5, say, I don't know when you don't. Be honest.
I have a friend that I knew years ago. She was so good at that. Part of it too was her journalism background. She was excellent at saying when she didn't know. And she had this beautiful curiosity about her that when she would say, I don't know, she would always follow it with, would you help me understand? She was so good at that. And it made for incredibly, watching her in action, made for incredibly rich conversation because she was so curious that she wanted to know the answer. It wasn't a means of deflecting. She sincerely was like, I'm here for it. What do I need to know? I always found her to be someone who was perpetually learning because she was always curious about what other people had to say. She learned so much that way.
Yeah. And she even mentioned on that when you come across as someone who has all the answers, people don't trust you as much. But when you actually are honest and real and say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to work hard on figuring out the answer to that. Or, you know what, you actually gain more trust from the other person than
it's real.
Being the person who knows all the answers.
Yeah, it's real.
So, okay, number 6, don't equate your experience. Their story isn't about you. So this one was interesting to me because it is so hard. This is a hard one.
This is hard.
Especially if you're trying to connect with someone.
Yes.
The example she gave is if someone you know just told you they got bad news. Someone passed away. Their child is having trouble with something. And the worst thing you can say is, I know how you feel.
Right.
I understand.
Right.
Trying to equate with them is the worst thing that you can do because you truly don't know how they feel.
Correct.
You may have had a similar experience, losing their job, whatever the experience is.
Sure.
But you've never been in their exact environment and situation to understand how it's impacting them. Yeah. So don't equate it. Just be there.
Yeah. And that's hard because it causes us to hold space. And sometimes because our instinct is to make them feel, you want them to know that they're supported.
Yeah.
And you genuinely want to make sure that they don't feel alone in that moment. But what ultimately happens in that moment, if they're vulnerable enough to share it, is that they need to be able to simply speak about it.
Right.
And they don't have the answers in that moment. And so someone just quickly minimalizing it to be like, oh, well, I've been there and this, and this. It actually is hurtful and not helpful, but it is incredibly challenging not to do that, especially when you genuinely care for someone and you want them to be okay.
And
can be
she
tough.
said, unless they ask,
that's different.
they ask, what would you do?
That's right.
Or I know you've gone through this. How did you get through this?
Of course.
But don't automatically assume. And it's hard because you're doing it from a good place. You're wanting to just let them know, like you said, there's a hand on your shoulder. I'm here. We'll get through it together. Yeah. But it's more saying that instead of saying, oh, well, when I went through this is because the further you get away from whatever the incident is, the tragedy, the bad news, the further you get away from it, the less severe it is. So you've already removed yourself from the severity of what they're going through at that point.
Right.
So So you're going to make it sound like it's not as important, or you're going to be fine. Tomorrow's going to be better. Those types of things. Like, it's not going to hurt forever. Whatever you're saying is the wrong thing to say at that time. So I was like, oh my gosh, how many times have I said that to someone?
No, it's such a good reminder. It really is.
Yeah.
Such a good reminder to just be okay to sit in the silence with someone and allow them to be and express themselves, and just allow that. Yeah. That's the support.
Yeah. And that's having a good conversation with someone, not, taking over, taking control.
Yeah.
So number 7, don't repeat yourself. Keep it fresh. So that's where, if you're just like super excited about some point you want to make, and that you're going in it and like, well, like I said, I do this, or, hey, when I did it, I did this. Well, like I said, when I do that, so it's like, once you've made your point, move on. Because you're, again, taking the conversation back to a point in time instead of letting the conversation evolve.
Right. And you're making it about you.
Yeah. Number 8, stay out of the weeds. Skip unnecessary detail. So I think we all do this when we maybe feel a little uncomfortable, or it's like there's silence, or, so for instance, so if I'm saying something like, I'm trying to tell you about something I did today, and then I'm like, I think it was at 6:00 yesterday, or was it 7? Or, I think, Joe came over at 2. So then maybe it was like 5. Like, why are we going into a timeline that has no relevance to what the conversation's about?
Yeah. My friend Kim had a story that she told about that. And she and her husband always summarize it to boxes or bags, because that was the sticking point, was boxes or bags. Like, was it boxes or bags? So now they just say boxes or bags, meaning move on. And Jim and I say it now when we get into the weeds of something like that. We're like, okay, boxes or bags, we're moving on. Yes.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Like, move on. Let's keep the conversation going. Number 9, listen more than you talk. Focus on understanding the other person. So that's, don't really have to say much more than that. Number 10, be brief. Respect people's time. 11, don't fear silence. Let ideas breathe. And there we are.
And there it is.
And then 12, be genuinely interested. Curiosity builds connection.
I have a friend in my life who he is very, he has mastered the art, if you will. I'm using that term loosely. He's mastered the art of asking the top 5 questions, if you will. And they're not genuine. I can tell that it's a reflex when he feels like he needs to either speed it up, or they feel obligatory. That's the word I'm looking for. So I always laugh. I can tell when he's made his point, so there's no more, but now he feels like he has to ask the questions in return before the wrap up of, like, if I don't, then I'm not doing the right thing. And my thing is like, if you're done, you're done. Like, it's fine.
Right.
Abruptly be like, okay, dude, I gotta go. Right. But instead of it feeling like, okay, so how's this? How's that? It's like, you don't really care, because my answer is going to mean nothing to you.
Right. So you've already turned off the conversation, but you're trying to wrap it up.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
It's so true. So I don't know. I thought those were fun. I thought those were, I think trying to figure out how to have good conversations is such an important skill, just as a partner in life, as a business owner, as an employee. We do so much. I feel like we spend too much time just trying to get to the end point and rushing through things and sending the quick text and all that, instead of actually pausing and really finding the true curiosity of what a conversation can teach you and what you can learn, and having that fresh perspective and being open to just what someone else may have to offer and teach you. And you will get that chance. A good conversation is a back and forth, so don't be so worried that you're not going to be able to answer some questions or you're not going to be able to.
You'll get your airtime.
You'll get your airtime, but it's not about a tit for tat. It's not about, trying to one up someone in a conversation, which so many times people do. It's like, oh, well, oh yeah, I just got a new car. What'd you get? Oh, this. Oh, well, I have a this. Or when it's, okay, again, that was like not really where we were going with that conversation, but I'm so glad that you shared that. It's like, I feel like we do it out of a nervousness, like a sense of needing to feel like we're important.
I think there's that. And I do think because we spent a lot of time in isolation over these past 5 years, I do think that there is some of that just learning how to connect again with people, especially if people were more isolated than not. And I do think at the end of the day, I believe people are genuinely doing the best they can. And a lot of that in those conversations is often they're really attempting to connect with the other person. They really want it to feel conversational from the perspective of, I get it, I understand, or I feel you on that. Not realizing that it's okay to allow someone to have their moment and not feel that there are other ways to identify and communicate and connect versus it just being about shared experience.
Right.
But I feel like that's been a bit of a lost art in these especially when everybody was in lockdown. I mean, you see it even with kids learning how to communicate after not being communicating, people being behind masks, like things of that nature. It just changed. It really shifted that dynamic and made it harder for people to have conversations. And let's be honest, there's been a lot of hot topics that have been very polarizing. So then there's also that. There's also an eagerness of people to be like, I so understand. I'm like you. I promise, right? There's that need to feel seen in a good light. And so there's some overcompensating that happens in those conversations at times that I don't think we used to care about as much. I don't think it was as necessary.
Yeah. I think
felt as necessary.
Agree. And I think what you just said really resonated. I think people just have this urgency and this need to be seen.
Yeah.
And so it's like sometimes they don't realize that in a conversation, being quiet tells more about you than having to have something to say.
Totally.
And you can be seen by that other person more by just your body language and like how you're reacting and the fact that you're being genuinely interested in what they have to say.
Sure.
That shows you're more of a compassionate person than just needing to talk for the sake of talking, which talking is not conversation. And I think that's like where I know personally, I want to get better at that. I want to get better at removing the distraction, which I am like queen of distractions with everything I have going on in my life. It's just, and I need to just really start to compartmentalize more and focus on the present. What am I doing right now? What's important right now? And this conversation that we're having is the most important thing. And you know what? If it's not, then you shouldn't be in the conversation. And it's okay to say, like you said, you know what, I really need to cut this short. I've got to go and do, because if you're not gaining anything from it, that doesn't mean you have to be a victim to the conversation. Like, let's be real about that. Sometimes you get into conversations and you're like, this is wasting my time.
Right. Which then is its own vicious cycle.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a very relevant topic that I thought we could just share, because I'm sure other people are wanting to figure out ways that they too can improve the relationships that they have in their life, both with their partners, with their coworkers, with their bosses, with their clients.
Yeah.
And just learning that skill of conversation.
Yeah. Which for me feels like that through line underneath it all is, it's okay to slow down.
Yeah.
World's not going to come to an end if I take time, whether it's 5 minutes or 2 hours, to simply connect human to human. The world's not going to come to an end. And that piece of self-importance, I think, is the piece that I know we get into a little bit of a trap as business owners. It's like everything we do is critical in this second. And I think letting those moments almost be surprises, like happy surprises of like, man, we're going to talk for 5 minutes about contract X. I learned so much about that person. It ended up being a 45-minute conversation. Sometimes that's the best part of your day.
Yeah.
Are those like really cool, juicy combos that you didn't see coming that day, but they just totally changed your day. Like those little moments of magic are amazing. And I don't think that comes from text messages.
No, absolutely not.
Right?
Absolutely not.
Sometimes it's just so good.
Could you imagine us trying to do our podcast just texting each other?
Yes, because we would use a lot of memes
and emojis.
And we would, yes. So I do think that could be quite visually funny.
It would be, yeah.
No, but true.
Yeah.
It's all about the combo.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm glad we were able to dig into that a little.
So when this airs, we'll put in the show notes, I'll give a link to the podcast that I listened to because it's a little over an hour. There's so many great takeaways from it. But her book is called We Need to Talk: How to Have Conversations That Matter. So anyway, we'll put that on our bookstore too.
Yeah.
For everyone.
So good. Yeah. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, it was a good conversation.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you loved this episode and know of someone who would find value in it, please spread the word and share it with a friend. We are passionate about redefining success, and it would mean the world if you could help us get our mission out to as many people as possible. Please take a moment to write a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. You can also hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Connect with us on Instagram at Success Resequencing Project or via our website at www.successresequencing.com. We'd love to hear your story.